Great. Looks like we're live. So welcome everyone who's joining in. My name is Janelle. Welcome to Mindful Nurses. We're so happy to have you here with us today. I, together with Claudia Wong, co-founded Mindful Nurses, both nurses ourselves. We wanted to create a space for discussing mindfulness and self-care as we both had our own personal journeys with burnout and stress and all of that goes into being a nurse. And so we wanted to create this space to talk about mindfulness and self-care. And we are having these Wellness Wednesday events every Wednesday with guest speakers sharing with us their own practices and tips and advice and insights into how we can care for ourselves more. And today we have a beautiful guest speaker, Vanessa Ruiz, who is both a nurse and a naturopathic doctor, who will be sharing with us about raising resiliency during the pandemic using mind-body medicine. And just to share a little bit more about Vanessa, we're so happy to have her here with us today. So she'll be sharing about raising resiliency using mind-body medicine, touching on acknowledging our circumstances, taking inventory of our internal strengths, finding meaning, coping with grief, consistency and self-care, restorative yoga, and other mind-body practices we can use. And Dr. Vanessa Ruiz is both a naturopathic physician as well as a registered nurse and founder of Nurses for Natural Health, which is an organization dedicated to educating nurses in natural medicine, empowering nurses as healers, and encouraging self-care. Vanessa utilizes natural therapies in an integrative setting to address mental health conditions at the Integrative Mental Health Center in Arizona. And she has been featured in Creating an Empowered Life, a documentary in the Young Revolutionary Minds podcast for her work in mental health. And she is also a national speaker teaching healthcare professionals around the country about alternative medicine. So we're super happy to have Vanessa here with us today. And I will turn it over to Vanessa just to introduce yourself and share with us a little bit about resiliency today. So thank you so much for coming, Vanessa.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's really a privilege. You know, when you talked about, I think about burnout, I think, people say, oh, you know about all these therapies and mind-body medicine, but I'm also an expert in burnout because after having gone through nursing school and then being on the floor and then ultimately going to medical school, it was, basically twice burnout. And having to claw your way back from burnout is painful. And so, at the heart of today is what I'd really like is for nurses to understand their own language and their own signals and when they're getting to burnout. I run a mental health practice, and in the beginning, around April, I shared with some other nurses, and I also did a video, but essentially my signal for when I was starting to kind of get to that place of burnout was really compassion fatigue, where I'm really passionate about what I do. And what I found was that I was getting a lot more patients around that time because of the quarantine. And I almost had this block of like not really being present or mindful to the suffering that they had, because I was getting to that place of getting burnt out. And so it wasn't actually until my friend, when I was telling her, I was sharing with her that I felt like I had this wall, and she's like, well, that makes sense, you're burnt out. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the sign. However, sometimes we don't translate what we know in textbook to what's happening to us. And so, bringing some mindfulness to our experience and what's coming up for us, especially during the pandemic, is going to be really important so we can gauge where we're at and what we need. And the first part of actually raising resiliency is acknowledging and assessing our circumstances. Because oftentimes, I remember in the floor, I would deal with something that was hard to process. but I just had to kind of compartmentalize it, and then just, I just got to move on. I just got to do the next thing. And that makes sense in like a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. schedule. However, our psyche, our bodies, they're not meant to compartmentalize. Our minds may be able to kind of hold off and kind of keep going, but at a certain point, we have to unpack that. Otherwise, what it presents as is maybe in the future, you may have depression, you may have anxiety. For me, I had a patient who who passed away under my care, and I was traumatized from that. And I compartmentalized that. Then what ended up happening was several weeks later, I would wake up at night seeing his face. And, at the moment, it was important for me to kind of compose myself so that my other patients had care. But then I didn't know that I had to unpack that. I thought, okay, well, I'll just, you know, I'm checking out of work, but your body, your mind, they don't have that opportunity to check out. So it's really important to acknowledge what you've been through, kind of assess also the circumstances. Oftentimes we're like, oh my gosh, this is, what's going on. I feel like there's so much happening. Well, really, truly, being a nurse, it's a hard job. It's a really hard job. And on top of that, you're being asked to show up during a pandemic. So people, sometimes nurses feel like they're not doing enough, but really it's your job that's really hard. And it's the pandemic that's really hard. So to truly inventory what you're going through, you can't minimize the hardness of being a nurse. And so part of that resiliency is saying, okay, it's a hard job. It's even harder now with a pandemic. And also that there's an end in sight. We don't know what it looks like, but this is temporary. This is a phase right now that is going to pass. There's going to be a new normal. And so that's really part of that assessing of our circumstances. And allowing yourself to feel whatever needs to be felt. If that means that it's, sadness, allow that to come through, and kind of give yourself the space that you give your patients. Because we often talk about our patients being constipated, right? Like the moment that they're constipated, we're like, here's a laxative, here's some senna, and just take it. However, we never think about emotional constipation, which is essentially when our emotions get backed up because we've kind of suppressed them for so long, or we haven't given the space for them to come out, or we're not sure how to deal with them. And so we don't really allow them to come up. And so giving yourself just kind of that space and that room to allow things to come up when they come up. There's an exercise that I frequently do with my patients, and it's essentially a guided meditation where we recognize that we're, for example, the blue sky or a soft river, right? And our thoughts, our feelings, they're either the clouds and we're the blue sky, or our thoughts and feelings are like leaves on the river and they just pass. Same thing with the clouds, they just pass. And so that allows us to not be so emotionally constipated. And that just allows us to witness the feelings that we're having without kind of going down the rabbit hole of each and every feeling or thought. Okay. And that does take practice. It's not like something that happens automatically. The other thing about resiliency is understanding that, that this is temporary. However, there's also a grieving process that has to occur. And in that grieving process, we have to grieve the life that we that has changed and that has been lost. So we don't know when things are going to go back to the normal, but there's a new normal right now. I mean, it's hard for some people because they can't travel. They might not be able to see their grandparents. They might not be able to even have a beer with their friends. And there's a grieving process involved with that. And so, not to minimize too what we've lost and how significant the change has been in our lives. It's really important as part of acknowledging what's happened to us. It's almost like a collective trauma. And in acknowledging and allowing yourself to feel what needs to be felt and grieving, then some people can move into this place of acceptance. Like, okay, this is what's happened. And really, acceptance is seeing the moment without judging it, seeing that there's nothing to fight about it, there's nothing to be angry about, although there might be some things we can feel angry about. However, we just accept what's happened, but they call this is radical acceptance. And then taking inventory of our internal strengths and values. And so what that means is it's kind of understanding what our values are. So if our value is to show up and be present, let's lean on that. Or if our value is to work with others and to be compassionate, then we lean on that. If another value is to kind of allow and be like a rock and steady, then allow that and be kind of lean into that. And so kind of understanding where we're at with our strengths and our values allows us to navigate these unprecedented times. Another thing is consistency with self-care. So what that means is that if we meditate, eat right, if we exercise, really lean into that, because that creates certainty in a time of uncertainty. And also, from a standpoint of physiologically, eating at regular times, sleeping at regular times, that helps to entrain the hormones and keep them regular, and also helps to lower cortisol levels and stress hormone levels. So while things around us might be kind of crazy, we can at least keep our physiology consistent. Okay, so really lean into that self-care, lean into eating with consistency, sleeping at normal times, and also um, uh, I just blanked out. But the purpose of that is to decrease the internal stress so that you can show up when there's external stress. Okay. So one of the things I've found helpful with my patients as they're kind of trying to understand what's happened, they're trying to understand how it all fits and kind of have a new normal, is also recruiting that higher spirituality. The ability to find meaning at this time is really important. And oftentimes spirituality and meaning kind of go hand in hand. And tapping into identifying what that higher power is for you. It could be God, it could be source, it could be nature, whatever it is that kind of takes you out of the almost seriousness of the moment, that allows you to have comfort and strength at this time. And also leaning into what helps to foster that connection with your spirituality. Is it meditation? Is it looking up at the stars? Is it being at the beach? All these things that help you to create more of that connection with your higher self. And then another thing is, kind of giving yourself a timeout. And we think of timeout, we think of children, like go get a timeout. But really, we're a lot like children, right? I've noticed that in the last few months when I've really, kind of quarantined myself and got really internal and kind of reflected on how I want my practice to be, since now I've had to pivot from seeing people online, it gave me an opportunity to kind of create what I really wanted, and the kind of sustainable practice. And so it was really important for me to have that moment to kind of look at how I wanted my life to be. And so give yourself that time out. It can mean a few hours, it can mean a few minutes. It doesn't have to be this really long time. So I think what I was saying before was, you know, we when I gave myself that time out, I discovered that I actually needed a few things for myself. I needed to be out in nature for at least 2 hours. I needed to have time to play. I needed to have also time to be able to sit and mindfully eat. And so these times during the day where you carve time for yourself and is going to be really important for that resiliency. Okay. Any questions so far?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa. This is super rich information. I really appreciate, especially how you started with sharing, just acknowledging that it's hard, that the work of nursing is hard, especially in these unprecedented times, but all the time as well. And I know for myself personally, that was one of the challenging things initially was just to acknowledge that it was hard to be able to say that, because I think there's a culture within nursing, especially emergency room nursing where I was working, where it's like you have to be tough and nothing is too much, and if anything's too much then it's a sign of weakness or incompetence or yeah, something to that effect. So I think it's really valuable that you're just giving us permission to acknowledge that it's difficult and that it's okay to feel overwhelmed and to acknowledge those emotions when they come. So yeah, I'm just curious if you have any more insight in that from your personal experience. What is helpful in terms of being able to acknowledge the difficulty that nurses are facing?
You mean in a sense of the hardness of it? Like how?
Yeah, or just maybe things you tell your patients, or ways of changing culture in the workplace. Yeah, some of the barriers or some of the ways we can support bringing this mind shift to allow ourselves to acknowledge the difficulties of
Yeah.
being,
Um,
yeah.
so when whenever I'm coaching anyone, I always kind of bring it back to themselves in the sense of what do they want out of the situation? How would they like to show up? And also to try to empower them in a sense of, you know, things aren't happening to you, right? You you have a ability to be able to respond in a way that really honors your values. And so kind of redirecting that, right? This pandemic kind of yeah, in some sense, it is happening to us. However, we do have a chance to respond in a way that's almost heroic, and to kind of keep that in mind as nurses showing up every day. You want to not almost, there's like a kind of a victimization that can happen, and in that it's kind of disempowering. So when you're going into the hospital, maybe setting an intention before you go, because oftentimes if you don't set the intention, then the day just kind of happens to you, right? And what I've found is when I've set the intention, when I go to the hospital, I set the intention, today it's going to be calm and peace, or calm and ease, or today I'm going to be present. That then gives you that what you want to lean on for that day. Because it's hard. It's really hard to When so many things are moving fast and then you've got a call bell and you've got like an admission, you're like, oh my gosh. But then you're like, wait, what did I promise myself? Okay, it's really a promise you made to yourself when you set that intention. How do I want to show up? Who do I want to be? Okay, I want to be peace. I want to be present. And then you move through your day, but keeping that in mind. And I found that that's really helped me not react to the day and to not just let the day kind of happen to me. And so I feel like that allows me to kind of come back at the end of the day feeling more fulfilled, like like I'd given a piece of myself to my patients. And so set that intention. Otherwise, that day is going to get ahead of you. Does that help?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Learning how not to react, but to respond and to bring our intentions into our actions so we're in control, have some control in our experience. That's really great. And we also have a question from Lisa Denla. Thanks for tuning in, Lisa. About besides compassion fatigue, what are some other cues we can look out for to know that we're experiencing burnout?
Okay. One of the things I've frequently seen and heard is the dread of going into work. It happens. So they'll end up doing like 3 back-to-backs, and then they'll rest, and then they'll get anxious about coming into work. So I've seen that happen frequently. And that's, oftentimes when you get an adequate amount of rest, like just vacation, then it seems like, oh, okay, I can try it. I can be more excited about work. But if you're not resting enough, then it's like that dread. Another thing I've noticed too is after, several shifts, a lot of the nurses that I coach, they end up just completely doing nothing on their days off because they're so exhausted. And so that's also another symptom to kind of look out for, because that might mean that you need to kind of rest. And other things I've also noticed is that they just don't want to engage with other people. They just kind of want to be alone. Don't ask anything from me. Because really, if you think about it from like a neurotransmitter standpoint, as a nurse, you're constantly having to focus, concentrate, and your neurotransmitters are always on, always, always on. And then the moment that you're off of work, you're just like, I want to just watch TV and I can't handle light, sound, or anything like that. Don't ask anything from me, because mentally, like, you don't have the neurotransmitters to be able to engage in conversation or to be able to engage in tasks. And so when I see that, I typically see that they're at that burnout stage. Is that helpful, Lisa?
Yeah, I think that's really great advice and great things to look out for if we're feeling like these signs of being drained of all of our energy. We really need to come back to rebuilding the energy for ourselves so that we do have energy to share with others, which is so important in the role of nursing. So
Yeah. And also, just as a reminder, like, kind of going back to what you loved about nursing. What was it that kind of lit your fire? Um, that's something you want to kind of go back to when you're feeling like, I don't want to go back to work. Because it's likely that you love it. It's just you're drained.
Yeah. Yeah, another great thing, remembering our purpose, as you shared before, connecting to that sense of purpose. So useful.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions we have at the moment, but I don't want to take away time I know you have a practice for us as well, so I want to make sure you have time to share.
So this practice I found to be really helpful. And primarily because I'm going to go through several different kinds of practices. This practice I found to be really helpful specifically for nurses because it kind of touches on things that nurses don't typically do, which is grounding, clearing yourself, calling back your energy, and then creating energetic mental boundaries. Okay, so what I'm going to have you guys do you're tuning in, sit as comfortably as possible. Okay, and if your feet are on the floor, not with your legs crossed, really, as you're sitting, kind of take notice of your posture, so that feet are on the floor and that you're sitting on your sits bones and kind of balanced, and let your belly just be soft. And start to shine your heart up as your shoulders fall down like capes. And start to soften the features of your face. If you hear any noises, just listen to the sound of your breathing. You can close your eyes or kind of keep them softly opened. Soften the features of your face. And as you're sitting here, listening to your breath, listening to my voice, imagine that there are roots coming from your feet. And those roots are plugging you to the earth. And as the roots descend down to the earth, just notice that the earth is supporting you, that you don't have to hold your feet up, that you can allow your feet to lean into the earth. And this is how you can ground for the day. This is how you can learn to lean on the earth to support you. And allow that breath, sending it down to the earth, down to the roots. And with every exhalation, you become more and more relaxed. And then imagine that there is water cascading down your body, from your head, washing your face, washing your shoulders, washing through your fingers, washing through your legs, and then finally washing down to your feet. And as the water cascades down your body, begins to clear you of the past, of any negative thoughts. And as you're sitting here, feeling grounded and clearing your energetic body, begin to call back your energy. Begin to see your energy moving towards you from places that you may have left your energy at. Maybe in the hospital, maybe it's with some friends. However, call back your energy now. And imagine that the energy returns to you and allows you to be whole, complete. Again, begin to tune back into your breath. Stay present in feeling grounded, clear, and whole. And in this last visualization, imagine that you have a white bubble around you. And that bubble can be as thick or as thin as you choose. And this bubble is to help you create a sacred space for yourself. And you can choose whose energy is allowed in that space. And you can also choose what energy is not allowed. And continue to be in your safe space, in your sacred space, as you breathe in and out. And over the next few breaths, start to be present to my voice and come back to the room. When you're ready, we can then move on to the next practice. So this last practice is incredibly important for nurses. The grounding aspect is really important because we have like this giant calculator that is always working. We're like massive bobbleheads. And so just bringing our energy into our physical body is really important. The clearing part is also really important too, because if you've ever been with a patient that is maybe not, your energies aren't jiving, or maybe they're kind of consuming a lot of your energy, or maybe something's happened with a coworker, it's really important that we clear that. Right? I talked earlier about emotional constipation. It's important that we put in a process where we just kind of let things go on a daily basis, because there's gonna be so many things that are asked of us. The more that we can clear, the more that we can actually be present. And in the future, the more that our nervous system is going to be more even keel. Calling back your energy is also really important because we leave our energy in all these different places. And in fact, we revisit these places all the time. I remember thinking as a nurse, I'm like, did I close that catheter? Did I throw away that syringe? And this is like constantly happening, right? I'm like, is that patient going to be okay? And this is really the time where we have to call in to our higher power and say, okay, I've done the best I could. I'm going to surrender that patient. I'm going to surrender that they're in good hands with that nurse that's coming on board. Also, I'm going to surrender that there is a higher power that is taking care of that patient. Or maybe that their body is healthy and vital, and I'm going to trust that their body is resilient and vital. So there has to be a way to call back your energy and to not be responsible for other people's energy. And the last one is creating that bubble. It doesn't have to be a white bubble. It could be a purple bubble. It's really up to you as you visualize it, whatever resonates with you. But we also need to draw energetic boundaries, because if we don't, then our patients will need us. But oftentimes, if we don't draw those energetic boundaries, then we're going to be drained. We're not going to be able to be present. Okay. Any questions about that last exercise?
No questions. We have several people saying thank you for the calming practice. Yeah, it felt very grounding and very calming. So
Good,
thank you for
good.
that. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if every nurse did that exercise and then
Mm.
showed up to work and then showed up with their patients, right? When I coach my nurses, I often tell them that your presence is incredibly healing by itself. If you breathe, your patients will breathe. And just to get, I'm a little bit of a neuro nerd. There's actually neurons in our brain that are called mirror neurons. And it's the start. So these neurons, essentially, like when a baby is looking at its mother, these mirror neurons start to mirror off of her. And this is the beginning of empathy. And so we can actually use these mirror neurons to help heal our patients, right? If we come into the room, we're present and we're breathing. How awesome would that be for our patients to see that, right? I mean, how many times do we come into a room and we're like, all right, I got your meds ready. Here, take your bucket. Whereas if we just showed up being like, hi, good morning. So nice to see you this morning. Like that automatically shifts and changes how that patient feels. So the other thing that I want to encourage you all nurses is to actually deep breathe. And the breathing is what keeps us grounded. So you can do a 5 breath in, pause for 1, 5 breath out. And that's just the simplest breathing that you can do. And so the breath in is actually the sympathetic system. So you're engaging more of like the stress response, focus, concentration. And the breath out is parasympathetic. And so if you need to relax, focus on your exhalations. If you need to engage your brain, focus on the inhalations. Okay. So that's one way to kind of change your physiology as you're moving through your day. Okay. The last practice that I want to share is I mentioned earlier about kind of radical acceptance. There's actually a book by Tara Brach, and she talks about radical acceptance and just seeing things the way that they are, and even seeing ourselves the way that we are, right? Because sometimes it's really hard to accept ourselves. Oh man, yeah. And I have a lot of, you can tell like that's something that I'm challenged by in myself. Some things that help cue you in is this is the way that it has to be. Or you can say to yourself, the present moment is the only moment I have control over. And the present moment is the only moment I have control over. And another thing is the present moment is perfect, even if I don't like what is happening, right? Many times have you been in an uncomfortable situation and then found that it was actually a great teacher, right? Where you're like, oh, okay, I'm really actually grateful for that moment. Because even though it was hard, it really taught me a lot. Okay, so the present moment is the only moment that I can control. Okay. So this next exercise is going off of kind of that radical acceptance. And this is called emotional freedom technique. And I use it really frequently. Because oftentimes when there is a negative, when there's a moment that's happening that we're triggered by, right? It's not so much it's not so much what's happening in the moment, right? It's more about how that situation is making us feel, right? And once we understand how that situation makes us feel, then we can move into a place of acceptance. Okay. So you don't have to say this out loud, but just think to yourself right now, what is something that's hard for me to accept? Okay. It could be about yourself. It could be about a situation or it could be about others. And when you brought that moment or that situation into your consciousness, describe how it physically, mentally, and emotionally makes you feel. So I feel blank when this happens, or I feel blank around this. So if you have that scenario and that feeling, okay, we're gonna we're gonna work to neutralize that. Okay. Because oftentimes in our minds, right, we think we have control over how we feel, but a lot of the times how we feel is actually a physical experience, right? I feel angry. Like you'll have, if you do feel angry, you'll feel that your fists are kind of tighter, maybe your jaw is tighter. And so you can try to think your way out of being angry, but your body's still feeling angry, right? And so we have to speak to the body when we're moving through acceptance too. So this is why emotional freedom technique or tapping helps to kind of neutralize these really intense feelings. Okay. So we're going to start off, and these points are actually acupuncture meridians, which is what makes them more effective. It's not like I'm just clapping my hands or tapping weird, points. So we're first going to tap. So what you're going to say is, even though I feel blank, and that's your word, that's your feeling, I accept this moment and accept myself unconditionally. Okay. And I'm going to repeat it with you as I tap. Okay. And you can keep your eyes softly open or closed, up to you. Okay. So you're going to tap here, and we're going to do this a few rounds because the first round is really just you learning how to do it. And then the next round is then you can get into your body and you can get into your experience. Okay. So even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. So I'm tapping in the eyebrows and then I'm going to move out here. So even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. And you're going to continue to deep breathe in and out. And the breathing is what keeps us grounded to our body. Okay. And then you're going to move the tapping towards your cheek. Breathing in and out. Even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. Continuing to breathe in and out. And then moving the tapping towards the bottom of your lip. Breathing in and out, even though I feel blank. I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. And then you're going to move towards the collarbones, just slightly like the middle of the collarbones. Okay. And you're going to breathe in and out. Even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. Again, breathing in and out. And then you're going to take your wrists pinky side and you're going to kind of karate chop. Okay. Right on the wrist here. Okay. And even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. Breathing in and out. And then you're going to tap the very top of your head. Even though I feel blank, I accept myself and this moment unconditionally. Continuing to breathe in and out. All right, we're going to do one last round, and you can keep your eyes open, like softly open or closed. And I'm going to keep walking you through another round. So come back and tap the inner corner of your eyebrows. And saying to yourself, even though I feel blank, I accept and love myself unconditionally. Moving out to the corners of the eyebrows. Tapping, even though I feel blank. I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. And moving to the cheeks, even though I feel blank. I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. Breathing in and out. And moving to the bottom of the lip, even though I feel blank. I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. Moving to the collarbones, breathing in and out. Even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. And we're going to karate chop our wrists. So breathing in and out. Even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. And in this very last round, try to grow and expand your acceptance for yourself even more. So tapping at the very top of your head, even though I feel blank, I accept this moment and myself unconditionally. And just linger here, kind of indulging in the feelings of acceptance, in the calm. And then when you're ready, lower your hands and bring them resting on your thighs, palms face up. And just take a few deep breaths here. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for engaging in these exercises with me.
Thank you so much for sharing these exercises. This is such a beautiful way to integrate what you were sharing before, the theory of acceptance and allowance, accepting how we feel, accepting our situation, and just really bringing this idea of acceptance out of our minds and into our bodies, and really feeling that acceptance and feeling that calm of allowing that acceptance. So I really appreciate this practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So others saying thank you, feeling zen, feeling acceptance for myself unconditionally, feeling calm. Thank you. Thank you. So everyone's really appreciating this practice. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Good. So I wanted to share just a few things. I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I do offer, it's called Safe Space Yoga, and it's essentially an online class that combines restorative yoga as well as they're really a lot of somatic therapies. And then we do offer at Nurses for Natural Health a certificate in restorative yoga starting in September, and then a mindfulness practitioner course launching September 15th. If you enjoyed some of the practices here, then please join us for those practices as well.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Very, very useful for nurses. Thank you so much. So for everyone who's listening in now and signing in, we will be sharing Vanessa's contact information when we post this Facebook Live. We'll have the recording on our website and along with Vanessa's contact information where you can find her so you can access these amazing resources and classes that she's sharing. So, and also ask any questions that you have that maybe didn't come up today. Someone just said, Pamela just shared, I'm celebrating 40 years in healthcare. Wish we could have had this all along.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. I wish nurses didn't have to burn out until, until they could get these resources. I wish we didn't have to burn out, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it paves the way. So
Yeah, it's so wonderful to become more aware of these resources and to share them more widely. And it's wonderful to meet you, Pamela, who's out there working for 40 years. Keep up the good
yes,
work.
thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much for the work you're doing. Okay, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thank you again, Vanessa, so much for sharing with us your wisdom, your insight, and these wonderful practices today. It's such an honor to have you and a blessing to everyone who signed in, I'm sure. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for signing on. And like I said, we'll share Vanessa's contact if you'd like to follow up. And you can also join us here every Wednesday. Next week, I'll be sharing breathwork practices for calm and energy as well. So hope to see you again. Hope to see everyone next week, and have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.